with me again, Jimmy Smith. How are you, Jimmy?
Stevie, I'm very well. We've seen a very good game of footy tonight as an improved performance from the Broncos, but I think there'll be a lot of disappointment in the Broncos football department about the performance of the referee.
Yeah, 20-18 it was. Manly over Brisbane up at what used to be North Power Stadium, Central Coast Stadium, and
Blue Tongue Stadium.
Before the giant crowd of, I think, 178, which is great to see fans back in games in Australia now. And, of course, Brisbane, for those who didn't watch, Brisbane led 18-0.
Yeah.
And were run down and overtaken 20-18. So pretty disappointing from the point of view of Anthony Seibold, but a better result than 59-0 last week. Jimmy, you said Anthony Seibold, the coach of the Broncos, would be upset, disappointed. What do you reckon things will upset him?
I think there was a lot of moments, very particular moments within the course of the game where the decision clearly went to the home side. I don't know whether it was the influence of that 178 or not, but whatever happened. There was a try disallowed to Darius Boyd where I think it's very clear that Daly Cherry Evans threw himself on the ground, and yet still he got away with the fact that he was impeded by a lead runner in the eyes of the video referee. I thought that was a really poor decision. A minute later, Manly scored their first try. So instead of being 24-0 up, they're up 18-4 at half time. And then the turnaround happened in the second half. And I think at one point it was 7 straight penalties in a row to Manly. And I don't know how many more 6 agains were in there, which is another big stat that needs to be collated along with penalties. So there was just a period of the game where I think the referee was refereeing one side, and it's probably a little bit disappointing to be saying that. Still a really entertaining game of footy, but I think the referee had too much impact on the outcome of the game.
They're very well known as being an intimidating crowd, those 176 people in the corporate boxes at Central Coast Stadium. They're absolutely ferocious. But, obviously the Broncos are, along with the Dragons and the Bulldogs, the clubs under a lot of scrutiny because of the recent results. Anthony Seibold, I guess, will be feeling that pressure as much as Paul McGregor or Dean Pay. So does that make him personalise what happened today a little bit, Jimmy? Did he start to feel the sort of personal pressure on top of the pressure that the team's under, and does that impact on his response to what happened,
Potentially, absolutely. Because I think one thing about Anthony Seibold is he is an emotional type coach, and he can be, especially with the media. I think he tends to have a very prickly relationship with the media, Anthony Seibold, which has sort of been generated, not of his doing, but it's been continued by Anthony Seibold, which it's a really funny relationship that he has with the media in general, but especially the Brisbane media ever since he was named as Wayne Bennett's successor. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It was a great coaching performance, really, to get his side to be playing so well. And that would probably disappoint him more than anything. And the thing about it is, I think the referees get to a point where they say, hang on a minute, Manly are a really good side, and a lot of people saying they can win the competition. This side that they're playing against were beaten 59-0 last week, and now they're going to be up 24-0. Like that doesn't quite seem right. So it's very hard to not let that premeditation come into play. And see, as a result of that, as I said, I think they got some tough decisions, and then beyond that, I think, yes, you get an emotional response from the coach because he's been under so much pressure. Steve, I don't know whether you've been following it much, but the northern media especially have been salivating about how the Broncos legends have turned on the club and they're no longer invited for a barbecue, and that wouldn't happen in Wayne's day, and all that sort of stuff. So, that's enormous pressure for a job that's already highly pressured.
Yeah, I've got to say, from my perspective, watching the game, in between tweeting for @LeagueHub.com, which you should follow us on Twitter,
Nice.
was that the Broncos were kind of, probably in a way startled that they had an 18-0 lead over Manly for the same reasons you said the referees subconsciously might be, and that in the second half there was an aspect of deer in the headlights, and they did run out of puff a little bit. I think the commentators made past comment about them not going to the air when they thought that they were having some success there. So, I thought I had this sort of feeling from pretty much the 5th minute of the second half, 4th minute of the second half, that Manly this is a white knuckle ride now for the Broncos. What happened didn't really surprise me, that they were run down and overtaken. So I can't say, although various individual decisions might have gone against the Broncos, I can't say that it was that surprising how the rest of the game, the final 35 minutes of the game, played out. But now, Jimmy, how much do you know about? Did it cost more to get in? Was it kind of like scalpers? They've got the only 173 tickets to this gig, and I can charge whatever I want. Was it just random? If you were a corporate box holder at Manly who lived on the Central Coast, you got a ticket at normal price, or were they charged extra? Do you know much about that? Or what
really good question around the pricing on that. I'm not 100% sure, and I know you're saying this with tongue firmly planted in cheek, but it was the corporate sponsors that were given access to it. Remember, it's a Thursday night and it's not at Brookie, it's up on the Central Coast. So there's that part to it too. But the people who were invited to come along were the longest serving members. So, you know what, I'm in a way, and it's really difficult to determine who you should invite along. I reckon those people who have stuck solid with you for the longest period of time deserve to be at the front of the queue. So that's the way it played out. What they paid, I don't know, but I think there was the time back in the day, and I certainly remember from the Cootamundra Bulldogs, but even the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, they would announce a gate, right? You wouldn't announce a crowd, you announce a gate. How much money was taken at the gate? I don't think they were announcing that tonight at Gosford.
Now, nice segue, well, not a nice segue, a clunky one, but going from the NRL into the recommendations of the Rules Committee here in England in the early hours this morning. I saw the press release at about 6 a.m. And I saw that they were adopting the NRL rule changes, and I duly went back to sleep and then woke up and there was a bit of a Twitter storm, and it was because they buried the lead, which is, that's the way things work when you're a governing body. But the other thing they're looking at doing, the recommendation, is to abolish scrums for the rest of the season in Super League. Now it's been asked to be considered. It's not a cast iron recommendation, and certainly not a decision, Jimmy. But the thinking behind it's very interesting. I had a chat to some people at the RFL before I came on, and we'll discuss that after I get your reaction to that news.
Given the fact that Cole Flanagan has been packing into the front row in scrums for the Sydney Roosters at one stage this year, given the fact I saw tonight Joel Thompson in the second row not even put his arms around the front rower, he just sort of leaned on him like this during the course of a scrum. I don't think there's any doubt that the chance for a win against the feed, the chance to push the team off the ball, which is all the things that 20 years ago you might have thought about doing. Those things aren't there. So essentially, what you're doing, and this is what was really interesting with the NRL, with their new rules this year about you had the option of taking the scrum wherever you like. You start to say, okay, why are they taking the scrum in the centre? Why are they taking the scrum to the right or to the left? And you go, oh, okay, they're trying to get this player one-on-one with this player. They know that this player has extreme pace, and if they can isolate that defender, then that's a bit of a mismatch that they're looked at. So I understand it from that point of view. What's their alternative? I think that's a good part of the game from an attacking point of view is when there's a whole lot of people out of the way. It's almost like, let's have a game of nines, but just for one play. And that's the amount of space that's available to attacking players. So if the RFL said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to just get the 6 players to self-isolate within 1.5 metre region of each other. 12 of them are going to stand in a certain space, and then the rest of them are going to give the opportunity to attack. It's a little bit out there, but that I can accept. If they just do a handover and, okay, let's restart it again, and defensive lines are set exactly like they would be from a turnover or a tap restart, then I think the game misses something.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, from what I've been told, this is being 100% dictated by Health England.
Right.
And the estimation is that a tackle is one high-risk contact. It's been estimated that a scrum has 132 high-risk contacts. There's some sort of mathematical equation at work there. I don't know what it is. And from what I'm told, Health England have said that if one forward tests positive between matches, then every single forward he packed into a scrum with the previous game would be put in isolation for 2 weeks. So really, they've been placed in a position where they haven't really got a lot of choice but to at least put this idea on the table. Health England and the English government aren't interested in what the rules are at the NRL. They don't have an idea on 6 again for a ruck infringement. Health England, they don't really care. You can do what you like there.
Why not?
You can do what you like there.
Why don't Health England have an idea on that? This is a tragedy.
But apparently also there is anecdotal evidence through athletes in other sports going back to training that once a week you will have a positive here and there. You will have a positive here and there. So the concern is not just getting back on the field from the point of view of Super League; it's staying back on the field.
Yep.
And if the government is going to basically take 12 players out of play every time a forward tests positive, and a whole team is going to be therefore banned from playing for 2 weeks, then the view is that getting rid of scrums is a small price to pay. And now I actually think it's very interesting because as you alluded to, Jimmy, the scrum in rugby league is not really a contest at the moment.
Yes.
And so it isn't a huge loss. And I know that in rugby union, they have talked about getting rid of scrums when they return in this country as well. And it would have a much bigger impact on their game. I mean, rucks and mauls have to be a massive, rucks and mauls have to be a massive consideration in this as well. Well, I think they can see you doing this, Jimmy.
Really?
We're on TV. They can see you doing it.
So rugby union can't come back if that's the case because they do rucks and mauls every time there's a breakdown, right? So if what you're saying is there's 132 points in a scrum compared to 1 point in a tackle, then within a ruck there's 50 or 60, right? So that's the concern for rugby union. From a rugby league point of view, and that's the calm we breathe here in Australia, right? When we've had 100 deaths for COVID-19 and everyone else, the UK's had 40,000. So that changes the way you think, and understandably so. You know, we are going through a restart of the NRL much earlier than most people anticipated, and touch wood, no player. You know, it's a massive story here when Benji Marshall kisses Michelle Bishop on the cheek and breaks the isolation, and yet they're both sent for testing and no one comes back with a positive test. But that's the biggest story. I can only imagine what would happen if someone did test positive for COVID-19. So, there's a real calm that we breathe, and we're worried about second wave. I don't know whether you saw the news, but someone at the Black Lives Matter protest in Melbourne tested positive for COVID. So all of those people who were involved in that protest are now being asked to self-isolate for the next 14 days. So, that's the type of thing that rugby league have been lucky enough in this country, or this country's been lucky enough, and rugby league's run off the back of it. UK hasn't had that.
And that raises a really intriguing question, Jimmy, is in order for rugby union to come back, will it have to introduce play the balls? I mean, you can imagine...
and drop two players off the field?
You can imagine the conversation. It's like, well, why don't you just play the ball between your legs when you tackled just for the rest of the year? And the number one objection to it would be no. It wouldn't be, no, that's a terrible idea. Or it'd be, no, because rugby league's already doing it. We would become rugby league. So... And this is a really interesting period in the evolution of sports, along with the evolution of so many sort of mechanisms and structures in society. And you do wonder if scrums disappear from rugby league in this country. Well, let me put it this way. If scrums disappeared from rugby league in Australia because the Australian government said that they can't happen for the rest of this year, there will be a strong case that they disappear forever. Now,
why would you waste a crisis, as they say? You know, if there's been a school of thought, and it only has to be a 20% support, 30% support, that maybe we should do away with scrums. Why don't we try it? And then you can say, oh yeah, we tried it, and the reason we tried it was because it was much safer during the COVID period, but it had a negative impact on the game, so we actually went back to scrums. Or you say, because based on what we've got now with the 6 again rule and one referee, if COVID didn't happen, there is no way that would have been pushed through by the ARLC. No way in the world. But because there was, okay, we're going to have a quicker game. We want less contact. We want. I'm going to drop a referee. Why? For financial reasons mostly, but let's hope it speeds up the game. We're not 100% sure. Why wouldn't you try not having scrums? And if it doesn't work, change it back.
Yeah, it's a great experiment, and also, as you say, I mean, of the experimental rules that are being tried in the NRL at the moment, are there any you think will change back at the end of the year, or do you think that they've all passed the litmus test?
I think they've all passed the litmus test. We almost saw a 2040 today, which would have been fascinating. I don't think we've seen a 2040. The 40-20, and by extension, if there's a 20-40 and a 40-20, why isn't there a 30-30? Like if you can kick, no, I mean this seriously. If you can kick the ball 40 meters, right, and you need to do that to get your 40-20 and your 20-40, why have you excluded 30-30?
So if you kick it from your own goal, now we're talking the opposite. Now we're talking about rugby league looking more like rugby union. Guys catching the ball in their own goal and just kicking it. If they find touch just before halfway, they get a scrum feed.
So right. So it's not about
back
where
to Malcolm Knox's column.
Yeah, it's not about where you that you have to kick from the 40-metre line. It's about if you can get a kick that goes 40 metres from where you kicked it to then go over the sideline, then away you go. It's your ball. Interesting. Let's talk about that, because I was talking to some rugby types about it, and they were like adamant it would never happen. Never happen. Never happen. Malcolm Knox wrote the article. You might background people.
Yeah, Malcolm Knox wrote an article saying which is something that comes up once a year. Someone writes about it. Why are rugby league and rugby union separate now when their biggest difference was professionalism? And they're both professional now. They've both got huge amateur numbers as well. So the only reason they exist is buried in the mists of history. So he's saying, well, rugby union in Australia is in trouble. So now is the time for rugby league to run it, basically. And then it's just a very interesting thought experiment. I did do a column about it on our website on rugbyleaguehub.com. The one thing I didn't mention in that, which is something, because I've written it before, is that I wouldn't follow a United Rugby. I just wouldn't, because I don't think what I like about rugby league is necessarily the aesthetics of it, the actual thing. I think it's more what I like about it, what it stands for, and the community that it makes me feel part of. So while I can almost support it on two counts, I can support it because it makes sense, and I could support it because it would put about another 6 hours back into my week every week, because I wouldn't watch it. Yeah. But anyway, but that's kind of the debate that's going on at the moment, and obviously in Australia, it's in sharp relief because of the financial problems of the Rugby Australia.
The issue around that is that there's only one country, there's only one half of one country of 25 million people on the planet where rugby league is stronger than rugby union. Mm-hmm. That's it. And every other.
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea, yes.
And the north of England, Yorkshire, Lancashire. But it wouldn't work like that, would it, Jimmy? Basically, it's too big a thing to say they should both get back together because, and I think this is a self-perpetuating obstacle with ongoing commercial agreements and television contracts that both codes have. You are collapsing. Rugby league would have to be on its knees to the extent that rugby union is in Australia. Like, it would have to have no sponsors, no TV contract, in order for it to be absorbed by rugby union. Otherwise, and no government funding, which is an important one. So both codes get government funding and government assistance in half a dozen countries. So you're saying, would those governments be willing to give the same amount to just one administration. No. So there are too many self-perpetuating, too many agreements to unravel and commitments to unravel for a true merger to happen anytime soon. But what could happen would be that the NRL could simply treat rugby union like it treated touch football and absorb it. So the ARLC would run the existing rugby union domestic competitions. The ARLC would administer the Wallabies. The ARLC would just run all rugby in Australia of both codes. That is not to that is the only people standing in the way of that, Jimmy, are people like me who are so committed either way that they say, I wouldn't watch it if it happened. And there's plenty of people on both sides saying that. And that is the only reason stopping a commercial agreement in Australia.
Other rules we're talking about, I think the captain's challenge is outstanding. And the reason is because tonight in that game at Gosford, Danny Levi went to the line by himself, disregarded the rest of his team, tried to score and get across the line, dropped the ball clearly in the tackle, got up and started blowing up. Now, I've already been critical of Ashley Klein performance tonight, but he got up blowing up saying they stole it in the tackle, and Ashley Klein said, you realise you can challenge it, don't you? And it immediately stopped Danny Levi in his tracks, and the replay was very clear in that he dropped it cold. Perfect. Put the onus back on the player. All right. You're saying I made a mistake. You challenge it. He didn't, and he can't say anything.
Also, Jimmy, I think for people who are used to watching, limited over cricket or NBA and that sort of sport,
Tennis.
A rugby league game is long. Like literally, it is long. Like for me, I've got a very short attention span, right? And I actually, unless it's really tight and there's at least a good line break every set, I get bored. I'll be honest, I get bored. So to me, the captain's challenge makes me look up from my phone and go, that's interesting. Do they do that today? I think it adds an extra distraction, an extra nuance for people who are easily bored, who've got short attention spans.
Yeah. And the other one that does that too, and this is where, if you're playing basketball and you're down a basket and the other team's got the ball, you can steal the ball back, right? Previously in rugby league, given that you couldn't strike for the ball in the play the ball now, that scrum, challenging in a scrum, as we've spoken about earlier, that was a thing of the past. The one-on-one strip now gives the team with a minute remaining and down by 2 the opportunity to get the ball back and have a last attacking set, as opposed to the other team just plays their 5 tackles and kicks downfield, which chews up 45 seconds. That's a good one.
The thing we discussed on an earlier program too, I think it was last week, was about blowouts, and sure enough, it was after the Thursday night game, which was 59-0, and there were close games all weekend.
Yes,
but I think now the sample is now big enough to say that the 6 again rule does not necessarily lead to blowout scorelines, but perhaps it was responsible for them happening at first, and perhaps it will be in this country as well, with the momentum. That it takes a while for a team to adjust.
Not only momentum, but also match fitness. Match fitness.
Yeah.
We were looking at the first 8 games of the first round, going, "Oh, look at the impact this has. Players got tired." And then you go, yeah, they got tired because they hadn't played footy in 10 weeks. And no matter how much training you do and contact you do, it's just not the same as playing in a game. I want to take you to a minute before half time. They're running upfield, the Manly Warringah Seagulls. They're on about the 50-metre line. Their replacement hooker, Lachlan Croker, gets out of dummy half and gets whacked on the nose by Matt Lodge. He does the thing of valour and gets to his feet straight away and plays the ball. If I'm Des Hasler in the video session the next week, I'm pausing that there and say, Lachlan, in future, and everyone else in this room, stay down. Because they would have clearly got the penalty for being hit by Matt Lodge. They would have had a kick for touch and the last 50 seconds to attack the line leading into halftime. In the end, it was the Broncos who had the last set going in, and they put up a kick for Xavier Coates. But it's funny when you see that, when you see it turn full circle, when you see it before and you go, oh, he's just staying down for the penalty. And now he didn't, you go, oh, why didn't he stay down for the penalty? Tough to win for these guys. By the way, Xavier Coates' star is born.
Yeah, he was great. He was great. Isn't it interesting though, the way we discuss staying down now? There was a game last week, and I can't remember who the player was, but he drew a penalty by staying down, and the commentators made one comment: "Oh, he's all right now," and that's it. Didn't dwell on it. 10 years ago, we dwelled on it, didn't we? We kind of accept a degree of gamesmanship now that we didn't accept.
That's what I was upset that Lachlan Croker had no gamesmanship in him. Where's your gamesmanship? Surely. Haven't you not been listening to Des Hasler?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was a big part of it. Big part of it. All right, give us an update. RFL. When are we back? Are we still looking at August for Super League?
Yeah, Jimmy. I have to go on what's in the public arena, and in the public arena, they're saying that August is still the date for Super League, and that there's very much a division on whether the Championship and League One come back at all. Derek Beaumont, the owner of Lee, was quite scathing in his criticism of the RFL this week in regard to what is the definition of a meaningful season. What is, and they're trying to get a definition out of the RFL. How many rounds is that? And there is obviously no international sport. There's teams in the top two divisions now that are overseas. So that also complicates things. Look, the Championship and League One seem no closer to returning, to be honest. Super League does seem closer to returning, and it's just a question of, under what rules, what competition structure, how long, how many times will the teams play each other, how does that intersect with, Challenge Cup, Super League Grand Finals, all that sort of stuff. So there's still a lot to discuss, but Championship of League One doesn't seem to have moved very much since we last spoke about this.
I think they're looking at a Super League Grand Final on the 29th of November, right?
It's one of three options, Jimmy. It's one, it's been that has been published.
It's the earliest of three options, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
if you look at this collective bargaining agreement between the players and the league in Australia, I'm not sure what it's like in England, but there's generally an 8-week break. So if you look at last week in November, and I reckon this year the first Super League game was late January.
Beginning of, it was the last day of January, the first day of February. So it's certainly going to have an impact on next year. And this is worth us mentioning. And then it can't have too much an impact on next season because the World Cup is next year. The World Cup has set dates, and we just had it's 499 days to go now until the kick off the World Cup. Yep. They announced some new branding yesterday. They also announced where the teams are going to be based. Australia and England will both be based in Manchester. And in the middle of July, we're actually going to have the draw. We're going to have the actual matches. So most of the teams are based in the north. There's, I think, one of the teams is based, not the men's teams, is based here in London, and they're pushing on with, the World Cup, and everything they're doing is top notch, and that is going to impact both Australia and the UK, both Super League and the NRL, on their planning for next year, because there's a certain cut-off point there. Remains to be seen.
Just to let you know, too, the AFL kicked off tonight as well, 2 weeks after the NRL. By the way, the NRL
How's the crowd? Did we outdraw them?
No, 177, I believe. At the MCG. No, I don't know. I made that up. So, but Richmond, the premiers were involved. I think it was Collingwood. I'm not sure. But anyway, the reason I wanted to make note of it was that they've done it without a signing off of a broadcast deal. So that is interesting in that they're playing, but they don't know how much money they're playing with the AFL. And that means Seven and Fox haven't come to the table yet and decided what they're going to pay them.
Jimmy, I just have to go for 1 second. Just 1 second.
Okay, Steve Mascord, ladies and gents, taking off. Clearly there's been a knock at the door. I hope he's doing the correct thing, which is asking who is at the door, the old stranger danger things. Steve, from what I understand, you become a bad role model to my children because we always ask them if there's someone knocking on the door or the doorbell rings, please ask who it is. And I don't think I heard you ask who that was there at the door.
No, well, I'll tell you, the situation here in England is if a package comes and you don't answer the door, it goes back to the depot and it could be a week before you get it. Right. So so I'm sorry about that. I wouldn't have answered. I wouldn't have got up and done that. But,
okay, well that begs the next question then. What is the anticipated package?
What are we talking about there? It's probably not for me. It's probably for my wife. Yeah.
Right. So you didn't even know what the package was. You just knew that you didn't want it to go back to base.
That's right. That's all I knew. Yeah. And all I did was open the door. I didn't even I think I was supposed to I was supposed to do something, but I just opened the door. Sorry, viewers and listeners. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was waffling on. So yes, no. So no AFL deal signed, which is interesting.
Yeah. So no AFL TV deal beyond what year?
So they haven't done a renegotiation. So they're still at 2022, and they're still looking at a reduction 2021, a reduction 2022, and they're thinking north of $100 million deduction for season 2020, and they're looking at so I think they make it about $417 million from their broadcast deal per annum. They're looking at a sub $300 million figure.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, obviously Peter V'landys, the numbers indicate, well, the situation and the indicated he did a great job. In a year's time, when we compare the two codes, and if the AFL have renegotiated, I guess that's when the judgment will come.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the classic, the bird in the hand, is worth two in the bush at the moment because it was going to be really interesting, the next broadcast deal anyway, let alone with COVID-19. So I think the fact that Peter V'landys able to go back to the clubs and say, I will guarantee you this money over this period of time is tremendous. And if it means, shedding a bit of the excess at Rugby League Central, then so be it. Because now he can ask the clubs to do anything, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And they will and should fall into line.
Rest of the weekend, Jimmy, what are you looking forward to?
I think this game tomorrow night's going to be a real classic. The Eels versus the Panthers, both unbeaten sides. Panthers haven't really impressed me. I'm still not a believer in the Eels, but I reckon Mitchell Moses versus Nathan Cleary is going to be a good one. Nathan's back. He's after not isolating himself. He was then forced into isolation, but now he's back and playing. He was the incumbent New South Wales halfback for the first two games last year. Mitchell Moses has been playing really, really good footy. And the beauty of it is they're now determining outcomes for their team, right? You either win or lose on the back of Mitchell playing well or Nathan playing well. So, looking forward to that game. Anything grab your attention in particular?
Yeah, Newcastle, Melbourne, for me, really looking forward to that one. I think Newcastle have been, really impressive at times this year and since they came back. And Melbourne, still a quality side. So I just, there's a lot of uncertainties, I guess, when you're looking at what game interests you most. You kind of you look back to recent form lines and you look for uncertainties, things that you sort of to complicate any prediction. And I'm not sure who to tip in that one. I really find that one a hard one to tip.
Kalen Ponga called the game last week with Kalen Ponga, and he was, I think, of 6 tries, he was involved in 5 of them, scored a couple, final passes and a couple of kicks, and he just an out and out star. Benji was dropped. Did you have a take on that?
I was surprised. Yeah, I was just really surprised. Benji seems to often get himself in a situation where he gets dropped symbolically, like the Kiwis, and I think it's happened a number of times in his career where it's not just about him; it's kind of about something bigger than him. I guess because he is a larger than life kind of player. I didn't look at his stats last week, Jimmy. Maybe they were terrible, but I didn't think he played that badly last week. I thought the try they scored was amazing.
Yeah.
It was one of the best tries, West Tigers, and I don't know. I was really surprised, and if he was a run-of-the-mill, first grader, if he was Josh Reynolds, for instance, would he have been dropped on that performance last week? I don't know. What do you think?
I think he made a really tough call, Michael Maguire, and we've got to remember this is the guy who dragged Benji back to the international stage for rugby league 7 years after he last played. So there's clearly a bond there that he said, no, your performance wasn't good enough. And I think there probably was a little bit of symbolism to it, to everyone else in the West Tigers squad saying, I don't care who you are. If your effort's not up to scratch, then I'm going to drop you. And that's what he did. He's been so there's 3 parts to the game for Benji Marshall, right? There's the attack part, no problem. There's the defence part, problem. And then there's the game management part, which you lead by 12, you lead by 10. You've got to win those games if your game managers are looking after you. And he didn't do that. He's let in 8 tries in 4 games.
So that's through him.
Yeah, so that's the defence side of things. So,
as I said, I didn't, maybe the viewers, disagree with me or listeners, but I didn't finish watching that game and go, geez, Benji's had a shocker. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a thought that was in my mind. Maybe it was in yours. It clearly, must have been in Michael's.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay well, mate. I reckon we're done.
Yes. We're back next week. We almost had guests on this week. So it was a last-minute thing. So we'll try to plan a bit more than 4.5 minutes ahead next week. And
that would be most unlike us.
And all being well, we might have a guest on next week. But we went out on an extra platform today. We went out on Twitch as well as Facebook. Next week, we might try to add LinkedIn or something like that. So we're like everyone, we're preparing for the return of in Super League, which we've got obviously a big vested interest in. And we're back in training.
Apparently, rugby league's big on Twitch, right? Is that what you were telling me?
The rugby league in the UK. I'm pointing to the north now. Rugby league has the women's game is shown on Twitch. They do have a Twitch channel. So and probably NRL, the computer games. That's big on Twitch, I would imagine. But we're big on Twitch now.
The other thing, when LaMelo Ball was playing for the Illawarra Hawks in the NBL, that was blowing up big time on Twitch.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So he had a triple-double in a game, and they had the highlights of the game on the Illawarra Hawks website. They had 7 million views.
Oh, no. And now the Hawks are out of business.
Now they're out of business. They were hoping LaMelo was going to buy them. Anyway.
Okay.
Good stuff, mate. Stay well.
Have a good weekend, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.
See you, bud.